I watched Endymion's review on Nightreign, and almost immediately I knew I was going to have an issue with it. Let me start by saying this. I have a lot of respect for Endymion. His coverage of gaming news, industry developments, and FromSoft updates has been a reliable voice in the space for years. Whether it's dissecting early leaks or giving brutally honest impressions, he's earned his place in the conversation. I've followed his channel for a long time, and I know he doesn't sugarcoat things. He tells it like he sees it. But with his recent critique on Elden Ring Nightreign, I think he dropped the ball. Now that's not to say he's wrong for raising concerns. In fact, some of them are totally fair. The boss pool is smaller than vanilla Elden Ring, the structure is more linear by design, and roguelike mechanics aren't for everyone. That's all worth talking about. But where I think Endymion's take misses the mark is in how it frames those design choices, not as deliberate shifts in gameplay philosophy, but as lazy shortcuts or signs that FromSoft is somehow losing their edge. And that's the problem. Nightreign isn't just a roguelike slapped on the top of Elden Ring, it's a focused and experimental game that trades open world sprawl for dense, high-stake progression. Now, I understand the comparisons with Hades or Monster Hunter, but the game, it's being courageous and doing its own thing, so it deserves a better analysis than "this isn't what Souls players want." So within this video, I'll not bash Endymion for his opinion. After all, he does have some good points. Instead, I'll offer a new perspective, one that sees Nightreign's design for what it is, a bold attempt to rewire how we engage with FromSoft's world building, combat, and progression, and how that makes this game unique. So without further ado, let's do it. One of Endymion's biggest critiques is that Nightreign's roguelike framing feels like a half measure. He suggests that instead of going all in on the genre's core tenets, permadeath, randomness, meaningful upgrades, FromSoft just slapped a few roguelike buzzwords onto a repackaged boss rush. And to be fair, on the surface, that criticism sounds reasonable. You do lose runs, you do unlock perks, but this isn't Dead Cells, it isn't Slay the Spire, and it's definitely not trying to be Hades with a parry button. But that's where I think the entire framing breaks down, because Nightreign was never designed to compete with those games. It's not chasing the roguelike genre for trend points, it's using roguelike structure as a delivery system for a more curated, high-pressure Souls experience. And when you actually engage with the systems instead of measuring them against other genres, it becomes obvious the structure is focused, not shallow. So what do I mean by that? Traditional Elden Ring and Soulsborne, more broadly, is about carving your own path through chaos, open-ended exploration, overlapping systems, optional bosses you can entirely miss. Nightreign flips that. It says, what happens when we close the world down? What happens when you can't farm endlessly, can't overlevel, can't hoard resources between runs? Can we still make that satisfying, even more intense by narrowing the design? And the answer is yes, because what FromSoft did here is lean into compression. Every mechanic from Nightfairer traits to relic synergies is built to offer immediate tension. You don't explore for 20 hours before finding a rhythm. You're in a loop within minutes, immediately you're dying, trying to learn and adapting to the closing map, and pushing forward with meaningful micro decisions, exactly what a roguelike loop is meant to deliver. And let's be honest, if FromSoft had copied Hades beat for beat, people would be accusing them of being creatively bankrupt. Instead, they did something more subtle. They asked how their strengths can evolve inside a roguelike shell. That's not a half measure, that's a focused shift in design. Endymion says this isn't a true roguelike. I say it doesn't have to be. It's a Souls-like in roguelike clothing, and it wears that outfit better than people are giving it credit for. Another major point Endymion raises, and one that's been echoed by a lot of early impressions, is that the relic system in Nightreign feels underwhelming or watered down. The argument goes something like this. Instead of offering the deep RPG build variety we got in base Elden Ring, the relics simplify things into preset bonuses and short-term perks. In other words, it's a downgrade. Less customization, less creativity, less freedom. But here's the thing. That criticism only lands if you assume that Nightreign is trying to replicate the same sandbox-style build system as the base game. The purpose is trying to refine it and to streamline it, to take FromSoft's traditionally bloated stat math and focus it around high-impact decision-driven synergy. And in that sense, the relic system is actually one of the smartest things FromSoft did with the design of this game. Let's be honest for a second. Base Elden Ring gave you insane flexibility, strength-faith hybrids, bleed builds, gravity spells, madness catalysts. But that came at a cost. Analysis paralysis. Most players didn't build so much as they Googled a setup, dumped points into vigor, and hoped for the best. You had dozens of talismans, hundreds of spells, and a giant mess of weapons that only really clicked after you followed your YouTube guide of choice. Relics and Nightreign cut through that noise. You're not wasting 30 hours to test a niche concept. You're forced to experiment. You're rewarded for adapting. Each run is a mini laboratory for synergy. Maybe you stack health drain effects on a heavy bruiser Nightfairer. Maybe you build crit streaks around light weapon chains. Or maybe you roll a weird parry relic that punishes timing mistakes and doubles down on that high risk style. Endymion said the relics feel generic, but that's missing the point. The system isn't less complex, it's more accessible. It's modular. Think of it like Slay the Spire meets Bloodborne. You're not grinding for 20 hours to unlock a perfectly min-maxed monster. You're solving a combat puzzle. Every time you dive in with limited evolving tools, and yes, some builds fall flat, but that's the point. They're not all supposed to be S-tier monsters. They're supposed to force you to adapt, not the other way around. Also, let's not ignore the role of remembrances here. Some relics don't even show up until you've beaten a major boss. That gives you a meta layer of progression outside the run, something Endymion overlooked entirely. It's not just about what you get in the loop, it's about what you unlock for the loop, over time. Is it perfect? No. Like Endymion, I'd love to see more long-run persistence. I'd love deeper cosmetic effects or narrative tie-ins, but the relics work. They turn each run into a build-making puzzle, without dragging in spreadsheets and wikis. They make the core loop faster, more reactive, and more personal. If you're fighting a boss like the Equilibrious Beast who is weak to madness, certain relics will have the ability for you to add madness to your starting weapon. It's not a perfect system due to the fact that if there's no madness on the map, your base starting weapon is your best bet and it's not very strong. However, it does give you the option to find the boss's weakness, adding one more layer of customization to the game. So no, the relic system isn't a step down from Elden Ring's build freedom. It's a step forward, one that trades bloat for intentionality. And that's a trade that I would take quite often. Not every time, but almost every time. Now let's talk about one of the most baffling oversights in Endymion's critique. The Nightfaires. They are more than just fancy skins or class presets. They are the foundational axis around which Nightreign's entire structure spins, and yet Endymion brushes past them as if they're nothing more than stat bundles and gimmicks. That's a mistake. Each Nightfairer brings a unique identity, playstyle, and long-term build evolution to the table. They determine which relics you can choose from, what your affinity scaling is, and even major story beats through their remembrances. They have exclusive relic synergies, progression routes, and in some cases entirely different ways to engage with boss phases or environmental hazards. Choosing a Nightfairer means shaping your roguelike run around a philosophy. Are you a risk taker who embraces bloodied momentum, or a steadied guardian who thrives on timing and control? When Endymion dismisses these as shallow gimmicks, he's ignoring the subtle brilliance in how they're designed to reward repeat runs, build mastery, and long-term investment. This essentially allows you to have 8 different lenses through which you can interpret the same brutal world. And that level of identity in a game this dense deserves recognition, not just a passing mention. Another point Endymion raised was about how the reward structure in Nightreign feels underwhelming, especially when it comes to boss rewards and the relic system. According to him, taking down a major boss only to get a meh reward feels like a letdown. But this criticism misunderstands what Nightreign is actually trying to do, and what it does better than people realize. Let's talk about Remembrances first. In the base game, these were powerful weapons, or spells, yes, but they were also flavor pieces, lore capsules that gave bosses personality after the fight. In Nightreign, they've evolved. Now Remembrances are personal quests for each one of the Nightfaires that often unlock unique relic infusions, Nightfairer specific augmentations, or core passive modifiers that persist across runs. They're not just trophies anymore. They're tools for long-term investment. You might not feel the immediate power spike after completing one, but 3 hours later when you finally figure out how to build and it hits that synergy point, that's the payoff. That's the dopamine. And let's not ignore relics themselves. This is a system that's incredibly easy to misunderstand. If you're playing the game like a standard RPG, or even like base Elden Ring, you need to understand that these are not meant to be straightforward linear upgrades. They're run shapers. Your build, your entire flow, your mobility, defense, and your elemental bias, even your boss strategy flows around these things. And once you start unlocking relic variants, Nightfairer aligned relic chains, and high tier modifiers, you realize this system isn't shallow, it's deep, recursive, and incredibly flexible. The key here is understanding that Nightreign wants you to experiment, to die, to rebuild, and to reforge yourself through that knowledge. That's the roguelike DNA. Endymion's critique seems to imply that because he didn't get that immediate gratification from every boss drop, that the game's progression loop is broken. But I'd argue it's the opposite. FromSoft is challenging players to learn how to value synergy over spectacle, and to think long-term, not just moment to moment. Endymion's final major critique touched on the narrative design of Nightreign, specifically the idea that the game's story feels fragmented, hollow, or disconnected compared to the base game's epic, sprawling world. And honestly, I get where he's coming from. If you go into Nightreign expecting a traditional Soulsborne narrative, filled with sweeping landscapes, political tragedies, and item descriptions that double as lore bombs, you're going to get caught off guard. But Nightreign isn't telling a story like The Lands Between. It's telling a story within a mind, within a fracture of time, within a dream corrupted by the Night Lord's influence. And your character, the Nightfairer, isn't just some undead warrior looking for grace. You're like a dream echo, a curated fragment born of purpose, not chaos. That framing changes everything. This is why the usual methods of lore delivery, wandering NPCs, long flavored text riddles, static world events, don't function the same way. And let's not forget the structure. This entire game is about looping through distorted realities and peeling away layers of half-truths. Instead of solving a clean mystery, you're navigating shifting identity crises at the edge of a cosmic collapse. If the story feels fragmented, that's because you, the player, are fragmented. It's not bad writing, it's intentional design. Endymion's claim that Nightreign's narrative lacks the emotional weight of the base game assumes the same storytelling rules apply. But they don't. Nightreign is an introspective horror, not high fantasy. It's meant to make you uncomfortable, confused, and desperate to understand a world that keeps rewriting itself. The payoff doesn't come from getting to the end, it comes from realizing how many versions of yourself died trying to get there. Honestly, Endymion, completely unscripted moment here, man. I love your content, I love watching your stuff. A lot of your opinions actually help me mold what I think about the gaming landscape. I feel like you just didn't give it the 40 hours minimum you tend to give most games before you come in and say something about them. And that's the primary reason I wanted to make this video. I feel like if you gave it just a little bit more time, and I know it's like being an anime nerd and trying to say, hey, just watch 3 episodes of whatever anime, and if you don't like it, then pass it off. I get that some people don't like this style with it, and I get that that might be something with you. I just felt like you kind of dropped the ball without the whole, I played this game for 40 hours and I'm this far into a thing that you do with every other game you do before you throw out a review. So look, none of this is to say that Nightreign is beyond critique. There are valid concerns about build diversity, balance tuning, and how well the roguelike structure sustains itself 40 runs in. And Endymion, he's not wrong for raising concerns. He's doing what an engaged critic should do, holding a game to higher standards and asking if it lives up to its legacy. But where I think he dropped the ball is how he framed his argument. He judged Nightreign like it was trying to be The Lands Between 2.0, a straight DLC sequel meant to recreate the original's magic beat for beat. But that's not what this is. This is a genre hybrid, a narrative experiment, a bold reimagining of what a FromSoft experience can be. What Nightreign asks of the player isn't just skill or endurance, it asks for trust. Trust in the devs to guide you through the chaos. Trust in yourself to adapt, change, and evolve. And most importantly, trust that even within a looping nightmare, meaning can still be found. You may not love everything about it. Hell, there are things I want to see improved in the future patches or expansions. But what we've been given here is ambitious and unique, and it's worth defending. So with all respect, Endymion, I don't think Nightreign is a failed experiment. At least not yet. I think it's a dangerous, brilliant success that dared to rewrite the formula instead of repeating it. Thanks for watching, and if you got thoughts of your own, whether you agree with me, Endymion, or neither of us, drop them in the comments. This community thrives when we challenge each other, not just praise or pile on. Remember, be good to each other. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one. Peace.